Imagine a child's face, freckles, soft blonde hair, pale blue eyes. Now, imagine that same child arriving at a struggling farm, hailed as a blessing after so much loss. That was Timothy Caldwell in the spring of 1866, an 8-year-old orphan sent to live with relatives unpacked in war-torn Missouri. To neighbors, he appeared gentle and well-mannered, the kind of child any family would be grateful for. But even before a single tragedy unfolded, there were already signs that Timothy was something else entirely. Missouri after the Civil War was a place of scars. Countless families, like the Caldwells, were missing fathers and sons, taken by violence or sickness. Orphans drifted between kin, their presence a reminder of grief, but also sometimes a ray of hope or a needed pair of hands on the farm. Rarely did anyone question where a child came from, but stories whispered in communities like Sedalia suggest that, every so often, a child arrived who just didn't fit. Folks believed animals sensed such things: the bad seed, the changeling, or even the child with the wicked eye. For Timothy's Uncle Thomas, weary and broke, the answer was practical. An extra set of arms for chores. His wife Sarah saw only hardship. A stranger's boy, pale and quiet, who kept his memories locked away. Timothy arrived carrying little more than a cloth bag and that distant, unsettling gaze. "His eyes are too old for his face," Sarah whispered to her husband on the first night. Timothy's politeness quickly became the talk of nearby farms. "Yes, ma'am," and "No, sir," at every turn. Never a crossword, never a whimper at chores or punishment. He never played or made childish mischief. There was no running through the fields, no shrieks of laughter, just silent obedience. Chores finished with haunting efficiency from dawn until dark. If you're starting to get chills already, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss true tales that push childhood innocence into question. Before we continue, take a second and tell us where you're listening from. Do stories like this exist in your corner of the world? Drop your city in the comments. Let's see how far these mysteries travel. The animals were the first to notice something wrong. Ella Lanena Patterson, Timothy's closest neighbor, saw it right away. Her chickens grew frantic whenever Timothy was near, refusing to venture close to the fence, clucking and flapping in crowded panic. "It's plain unnatural," she'd tell her husband over supper. "That boy works like a machine, but he never smiles. And the animals, they can feel it, even if we can't." It wasn't just the chickens. The family's old dog tucked his tail and hid beneath the porch whenever Timothy came into the yard. Cows turned fretful, refusing to settle when he led them to water. There's something about children and animals. Some say creatures sense what adults can't, a sixth sense against danger. In rural America, those instincts sometimes meant the difference between life and death. Even Dr. Samuel Harding, who'd spent years tending the wounded of war, didn't know what unsettled him during his first meeting with Timothy. The boy answered questions politely, made steady eye contact, never flinched at a stranger's presence. Yet, Harding wrote, the child's gaze was like being examined, studied with a quiet, unnatural focus. In town, folks chalked it up to hardship or grief. Still, a few began to wonder out loud. Could a child really carry darkness within him? It wouldn't be the last time small hints spiraled into rumors and dread. Can you remember a time when an animal acted strangely around someone you know? Was it just your imagination? Or did you feel a warning? Let us know in the comments. The next sign would be far more disturbing, a tragedy that would mark the start of something Sedalia had never seen before. But what happened next would send an even darker chill through the countryside. The town's first real tragedy landed at Timothy's feet before anyone could connect the dots. It was August, sweltering, the kind of day when Missouri's grass crackles underfoot. 5-year-old Mary Fletcher, the blacksmith's cheerful daughter, was found dead in Willow Creek. The story spread quickly. Timothy was the one who found her. He showed up at the Fletcher's door, clothes damp, voice trembling as he delivered the news. Mrs. Fletcher recalled how Timothy described the scene with an unsettling amount of detail. Where the body lay, how her dress caught on a branch, the pale color of the water around her face. He claimed he'd been searching for a missing calf, an explanation his uncle confirmed. But Dr. Harding couldn't help but notice how precise Timothy's memory was, how emotionless he seemed in describing it all. Little Mary's death was ruled an accident. Rural drownings happen more often than people today might expect, especially with children running wild near open water. But for those who paid attention, the way Timothy's eyes scanned the church at the funeral, dry and ever watchful, the first seed of doubt was planted. Not 3 weeks later, tragedy struck again. Old Henrik Len, known for his careful steps along Devil's Bluff, was found at the base of the rocks with his neck broken. Once again, Timothy was the one to find him, and once again, he recounted the details calmly. "I saw Mr. Len's hat caught on a thorn bush. Called out, climbed down, found him there." Dr. Harding noted a strange detail. Dozens of dead bees clustered around Henrik's body, although the hives above were undisturbed. If this story is giving you chills, share it with a friend who loves uncovering the darkest corners of history. Let's see who lasts through the whole story. Rural accidents, yes, but why always with Timothy near? 2 deaths, both tragic, both accidental, or so it seemed. But the pattern didn't end there. In September, Jacob Mills, age 6, disappeared while playing near the woods. Once again, Timothy joined the search parties, displaying exhaustive knowledge of the terrain, guiding adults to places others would never look. It was Timothy who led Jacob's distraught father to the hidden well. Jacob, clinging to life but too weak to be saved, would die hours later. 3 deaths now, 3 moments where Timothy just happened to be in the right place at the right time. These accidents mirrored whisper-tight mysteries from other 19th century communities, stories of children always present at misfortune, of neighbors growing distrustful behind polite greetings. History is littered with cases where tragedy kept itself close to a single person. Was it fate or something far more deliberate? Dr. Harding's instincts, sharpened by war and years of dealing with life and death, began to churn. What he discovered next would shatter the town's faith in innocence and force Sedalia to confront pure evil in a child's form. Before we open Dr. Harding's secret journals, tell us, do you believe in coincidence, or is there a pattern you can't ignore? Drop your thoughts below. Troubled by the growing shadow around Timothy, Dr. Harding began his own quiet investigation. He started by asking subtle questions around town, checking on neighboring farms, and combing through his own notes for patterns he might have missed. What he uncovered wasn't just a string of accidents, it was a chilling escalation. Livestock near the Caldwell place died in odd, clinical ways. Chickens with precisely broken necks. Calves accidentally strangled in ways no common animal could have managed. Pigs and horses suffering wounds that resembled experimentation more than nature's randomness. Harding also paid special attention during his house calls. Timothy was always nearby, silent, watching as the doctor checked over his aunt and uncle. He asked questions that other children wouldn't dream of. How do you know when someone's really dead? Can you tell just by looking? How long does it take if someone can't breathe? And he listened, storing every detail. Harding even tested him, feeding false answers now and then. Timothy never corrected him out loud, but there was a knowing look behind those eyes, as if he was building his own private library of knowledge. In the broader world, doctors were only just beginning to discuss words like moral insanity. The concept of a child without empathy, a psychopath, was shocking, barely whispered about except in medical circles reading the new science from Europe. In other towns, rumors sometimes surfaced of young people drawn to cruelty, but there was little the authorities could do unless evidence became unavoidable. Harding's records, full of clinical detail, would later be seen as some of the first American attempts to document such a chilling idea. Now, Vault of Vile watchers, imagine being Dr. Harding. Do you risk everything, your reputation, maybe your career, to expose what might be happening? Or do you keep your suspicions to yourself, waiting for proof? What would you do if you saw these signs in your own community? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to know how you'd react. But even Dr. Harding wasn't prepared for what he'd find hidden in a nearby cave. And that discovery would reveal Timothy's true nature in ways the town would never forget. Before we continue, make sure you're subscribed and hit the notification bell if you want to keep unraveling this story, because things are about to get a lot darker. Inside a limestone cave near the edge of Caldwell Land, Dr. Harding discovered the evidence that would turn suspicion into horror. The cave was hidden behind thick brush, a place Timothy had casually mentioned as his thinking spot. What Harding found inside changed everything. Laid out on flat rocks in careful surgical order were bones from dozens of small animals: rabbits, birds, squirrels. Some were arranged in neat patterns, labelled with hand-carved notches or scraps of paper detailing the animal's injuries. Among them were makeshift tools, blades shaped from old farm implements, and rough sketches drawn in charcoal. These weren't crude doodles, they were diagrams, labelled with disturbing accuracy, documenting the anatomy, suffering, and final moments of each creature. Most chilling were Timothy's written notes. In a careful child's hand, subject remained conscious for 9 minutes after incision. Vocalization slowed after pressure applied to neck. Each note was clinical, detached, more fitting for a science journal than a child's drawing pad. Then came the human sketches. There was Mary Fletcher by the creek, Jacob Mills in the well, even Mr. Len at the base of Devil's Bluff. Timothy had drawn not just the scene, but the injuries, the expressions on their faces, their bodies' final positions. With them were speculative notes. How long till breathing stops? What happens if I leave them alone? Observers of notorious medical cases know these features. The urge to document, the fascination with cause and effect. These are the first signs of a mind experimenting, not grieving. Medical ethics barely existed for children in this era, but even among grown doctors, nothing close to this was known. A child, methodical, scientific, and devoid of compassion. Later, debates on nature versus nurture and infamous cases like the Borgias of London would recall such cold curiosity, but in 1867 Sedalia, it was unspeakable. Before we continue, have you ever seen evidence of cruelty hidden in plain sight? Something that looked normal but behind closed doors was deeply wrong? Give this video a like, and if you want more true horror from history, make sure you're subscribed. But Timothy's experiments weren't over. As Dr. Harding stared at the cave's awful trophies, he understood. Timothy's darkest experiment had just begun, with his own family the next intended victims. Shocked and desperate, Dr. Harding knew time was running out. Timothy's journals showed his fascination was moving from animals to people, his own aunt and uncle now in deadly danger. Harding rushed to Sheriff Crawford, laying out what he'd found. The cave of horrors, the drawings, the chillingly meticulous notes. It was almost impossible to believe. A child, polite and helpful, planning murder as a kind of living science experiment. But even as the sheriff and his trusted deputies formed a plan, they faced real challenges. In the 1860s, there were almost no laws for dealing with violent children. The idea that a child could be a murderer was so unthinkable, many towns simply refused to believe it. Even later, infamous juvenile cases, like Jesse Pomeroy in Boston, proved how society struggled with the concept of child evil. Still, they chose to act. Dr. Harding would visit the Caldwell farm at his usual time, while Crawford and 2 deputies hid nearby. Timothy, sharper than anyone expected, was already preparing. When Dr. Harding arrived, he found Uncle Thomas and Aunt Sarah drugged, alive but unconscious, dosed carefully with wild plants. The house, usually busy with chores, was filled with a heavy, unnatural silence. Timothy was waiting, sleeves rolled up, hands scrubbed as though for surgery. When confronted, he confessed freely. He spoke of Mary Fletcher's drowning, Henrik Len's accident, and Jacob Mills's drawn-out end in the well. He described the experiments with clinical detail, as if reciting a lesson. "I want to see what happens when you hurt someone who trusts you," he explained. Timothy had planned it all, the dosage, the timing, even the potential outcomes if Dr. Harding tried to intervene. The confrontation exploded into violence. Timothy, despite his size, fought with shocking skill and determination. Only the arrival of Sheriff Crawford's team saved Dr. Harding and the unconscious Caldwells. Timothy, once bound and bloodied, stared at his captors with that same icy confidence. "You won't hang me. I'm too young. Someone will want to study me instead." Would you believe a child could do this? How would you convince the sheriff if you were there? Share your thoughts in the comments. These are the moral puzzles true crime rarely solves. If this isn't the creepiest thing you've heard, make sure you're subscribed for stories that only get darker. But hold on. Timothy's capture was just the beginning. Timothy Caldwell was locked away, but the nightmare didn't end. Authorities faced a daunting problem. He was too young for prison, too dangerous for an orphanage, and so disturbed that even the era's leading doctors had no real answers. In the end, they sent him to the Missouri State Hospital for the Insane, a grim institution, more fortress than refuge, where doctors hoped to study and maybe fix what Timothy represented. But no one there was prepared for the boy's mind. Timothy adapted fast, watching and learning the routines of everyone around him. He cried when expected, acted grateful, and talked of rehabilitation. But Dr. Harding, who visited and documented his progress, saw through it. Timothy was only mimicking feelings. Behind his apologies was the same flat, chilling curiosity. Soon, strange things started happening at the hospital. Elderly patients died suddenly, with Timothy always having been near. Other children suffered accidents in secured wards. Staff reported nightmares or feeling watched. A nurse, believing Timothy's therapy depended on writing, gave him paper and pencil. Later, Dr. Fitzgerald, the hospital's new psychiatrist, found his innocent journal hid coded entries. Timothy was documenting security weaknesses, staff schedules, ways to manipulate trust. Forensic psychiatry was in its infancy, but experts would later point to cases like Timothy's as proof of how manipulators and future serial predators could appear utterly harmless. Even in the locked wards of places like Missouri State Hospital, the science of the mind had met its match. Tell me, do you think someone like Timothy can ever be truly stopped? Or will minds like this slip through any system we create? Leave your thoughts below, and if these tales of real darkness pull you in, share this video with a friend who won't dare watch alone. But Timothy Caldwell wasn't finished. One night in 1868 he vanished, slipping out during a transfer, leaving only rumors and terror behind. His escape was so clean, so well timed. Some say he planned it for months, reading his keepers like open books. Don't go anywhere, because what happened after Timothy's disappearance would leave a mark on Sedalia and American criminal history forever. Even after Timothy disappeared, his shadow lingered over Sedalia and beyond. Dr. Harding, haunted and relentless, spent years tracking accidents, mysterious animal deaths, and chilling cases across the Midwest. Whenever a child appeared unusually calm, oddly knowledgeable, or present at a scene of unexplainable tragedy, Harding took notice. Newspapers in those decades often buried stories of strange deaths or vanished children, but Harding's private journals became a secret map of possible Timothy sightings. Back in Sedalia, the Caldwell farm was abandoned. Neighbors refused to buy the land, whispering that the ground was cursed and animals would not graze there. The cave where Harding had found Timothy's grim experiments was sealed off by order of Sheriff Crawford, but local boys dared each other for decades to find it, fueling the region's folklore nightmares. These stories fueled growing debates in American law and medicine. Timothy's case was still hushed in official records, but his methods, his manipulation, his ability to fool adults, his total lack of empathy, began to show up in medical texts as examples, not by name but in spirit, as warnings about childhood depravity. Psychologists and legal scholars referenced him as part of the reason juvenile justice began to change in America, introducing reforms that linger to this day. As for Dr. Harding, he never stopped trying to understand what Timothy truly was. Aberration or omen? He donated his detailed journals decades later, records that today sit in a Missouri historical archive, rarely accessed, always with a warning about their disturbing contents. Urban legends claimed Timothy returned as an adult, passing among towns under new names, always just out of reach. Some said his crimes inspired later cases of elusive killers who seemed both young and old, uncatchable, always studying. No one could prove the rumors. The official record simply ends with his escape, leaving questions behind that chill the soul. Do you think Timothy Caldwell's story ended in that Missouri summer? Or did evil truly slip away, folding itself back into the shadowed cracks of history, waiting to emerge again? Prove you're braver than most. Leave your thoughts below, and let us know if you've heard legends like this where you live. If this haunting journey left you with chills, subscribe and ring that bell for more stories from the Vault of Vile. And remember, the darkest mysteries aren't always hidden by time. Sometimes they wear the face of a child. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious,